Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, meine Damen und Herren, Madame et Messieurs, etc., etc. As a blogger and as a political scientist and historian and a former instructor at the University of Victoria and not only there, and a former member of certain groups closely connected with North Atlantic Treaty Organization, I should not refrain from recording this short video in regards with the recent summit in Alaska. That summit was very interesting for a number of reasons. First, that it occurred in the former Russian territory. You probably don't know, but in the 19th century, Alaska was part of the Russian Empire, and it was sold to the United States for a number of reasons which are beyond the topic of this short video. But it was a kind of trolling for President Putin. Once Alaska was Russia, and it is never going to be Russia again, and once Ukraine was Russia, and it's never going to be Russia again. Plus the demonstration of the new air jets and many other things. That was a very skillful trolling, but that doesn't matter. What were the results of that summit? As we understand, there were no results. No agreement was reached, and why am I not surprised? By the way, I'm pretty sure it wasn't Vladimir Putin himself was there, but one of his doppelgangers. He didn't look like Putin, he was taller than Putin, he was not talking like Putin, etc., etc., but that's not important. Putin is a coward and he would never leave his bunker. But again, it doesn't matter. The thing is that no agreement was reached. Why so? One of the reasons is that Putin, or whoever is behind him, he's definitely a puppet. Whose puppet, I don't know. And I don't want to know, because those who know that would never say a word about that. But anyway, Putin and those who are behind him do not want peace with Ukraine. And that's not because they want to take over Ukrainian territory. They don't need that territory. In fact, it's useless. But unlike West European and North American leaders, Putin knows Russian history, real Russian history, not the one which is in the fake history books, which are covering alternative history rather than real one. Putin and his advisors know very well that each and every time, starting with the early 19th century, when Russian troops were returning from Europe, there was always a coup d'etat in Russia. Sometimes successful, sometimes not. For example, in 1825, there was an uprising of the Decembrists, of Russian soldiers and officers who wanted to overthrow the empire, the imperial regime. And it wasn't successful, and thank God it wasn't successful, because they were perverts as well. But that doesn't matter. There was the first Russian Revolution in 1905, after Russian troops returned from the Russo-Japanese War, which Russia lost. At the end of World War I, the Great War, Russian soldiers who returned from the front lines made a March coup that overthrew the empire. And Russia became a republic, which was later also overthrown by the Bolsheviks. The peace treaty between Russia and Germany, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918, resulted in the execution of the whole royal family. Putin knows that. Also, the Afghan war resulted in about 500,000 veterans who came back to Russia, organized criminal groups that were terrorizing the whole Russian population, and for many reasons, Russia's defeat in Afghanistan resulted in the fall of the Soviet Union. Yeah, we forgot about World War II, and that was another lesson that Putin learned. After World War II, Stalin was panically afraid of a coup that could be committed by the returning soldiers and officers. And one of the reasons, according to Putin, why that didn't happen was that hundreds of thousands of Russian troops were left in the occupied territories: East Germany, Austria, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria. If all of them would have come back to Russia, God knows what could have happened. So Vladimir Putin is panically afraid, Vladimir Putin and those who are behind him are panically afraid of hundreds of thousands of angry Russian soldiers returning back home. Some of them with weapons, others without weapons, but knowing very well how to get the weapons and how to operate it. So he is interested to this war to continue, and he is interested in probably conquering more lands. That could include the Baltic states, Poland, and maybe beyond that. So the question would be, what needs to be done to resolve the issue? In my humble opinion of a political scientist and historian, there are three variants. Variant number one: patiently wait till the moment when Russia collapses. It will collapse eventually. Its economy is not doing well. The unemployment rates are growing despite the fact that military industry offers more jobs than there had been before. The quality of life is going down. However, Russian people and other ethnic groups that are dominated by the Russians, they have a great resort for tolerating poverty, unemployment, and you name it. So counting on that is possible, but you never know how long you'll have to wait. Maybe 10 years, maybe 50 years, maybe 1 year, but that's unlikely. Variant number two. Of course, the easiest way to stop the war would be military defeat of Russia. Give Ukrainian army the most sophisticated weapons, give them instructors, give them selected elements of NATO armed forces, American, French, British, German, you name it, Polish, of course, and Russia can be defeated. And that would be great, especially because the defeated Russian troops would flee back to Russia and will organize a nice show over there. But unfortunately, Europe doesn't have leaders with guts who would go for that. Everyone is afraid of Russia using nuclear weapons. Nobody knows whether Russia has nuclear weapons. That's another question. But the worst part of it is fear of the use of Russian nuclear weapons. By the way, Turkey, for example, is not afraid of it. During the conflict in Syria, Turks shot down a couple of Russian air jets who were crossing Turkish airspace, and nobody attacked Turkey. No retaliation, no use of nukes. But Turkish government, well, I am not in favor of it, but they have guts. Alas, West European allies do not have guts. Donald Trump does, but America probably is the only country that has a leader that has guts and political will. That would be the best solution, but probably it's unrealistic. The third solution, the most realistic one, I guess, to follow the pattern of US-Taiwanese agreement regarding the relationship between Taiwan, China, and the US. The principle of 3 N's, or 3 no's. Not this no's, but no in the sense of niet, 9, no. 3 no's in regards with Russian-Ukrainian relationship could mean the following. No, number 1. No recognition of Russian territorial acquisitions. De facto territorial acquisitions. So the front line of today can be conserved as a temporary demarcation line, but not a state border. So on all the maps we're showing 4 partially conquered Ukrainian provinces as Ukrainian provinces, but temporarily occupied by Russia. So no annexation, no recognition of Russia's annexation. No, number 2. No Ukraine in NATO. hate saying that, but that's probably not important at this moment. It would be very important if Ukraine and Georgia had been allowed to join NATO before August 2008, when Russia invaded Georgia and a few years later invaded Ukraine. Right now, that train is gone. And Russia should be satisfied with the second no. No Ukraine within NATO. And no number 3, the most important one. A mutual defense treaty between Ukraine and the United States of America. That would mean that any further attempts of Russian expansion in Ukraine means an attack on the United States of America, with a proportional response. So, Russian leaders should understand that if they take another meter of Ukrainian territory, it means the war with the United States of America. Nobody will go for that. Just like China is not daring to invade Taiwan so far. In my humble opinion, that would be the best solution. Some skeptics would say, well, look at Taiwan and look at Ukraine with its corruption and with the thieves at power. Well, first, there are certain ways to remove the current Ukrainian administration and replace it with a more decent one. But that's not the most important part of it. You know what was Taiwan when that agreement was concluded? Taiwan was a weak, corrupt country with dictatorship of Chiang Kai-shek. And you know what Taiwan was exporting? You know that today Taiwan is exporting high technologies. But those days, the only thing that Taiwan could export was rice. And when dictatorships started slowly turning into sort of democracy, the candidates were carrying with them big bags of cash, and they were paying cash for people to vote for them. That's how Taiwanese democracy started. Right now, Taiwan is a well-developed industrial power and democratic country. So everything is possible. And by the way, one could say Ukraine doesn't have Chiang Kai-shek. No, Ukraine doesn't, but Ukraine has, for example, General Zaluzhny. What's wrong with him? The third variant would be probably the most reliable one and the most realistic one. That's my personal proposal. I don't know whether American president would like that or not. I don't know that, and I have no connection with him, unfortunately. But that's my idea, which I decided to share with you. Wishing you all the best. Enjoy the remainder of this summer. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.